The history of slavery. The first African slaves arrived in Jamestown in 1619. This is the first record of African slaves in the colonies, although many more will be coming in the future. Conditions on slave ships were terrible. Men, women, and children were crammed together in small spaces so tight they couldn't even move around. It was dark with very little air, and the smell was awful. The slaves were chained, underfed, and many were very sick. In fact, it was very common for slaves to die along the way and be thrown overboard. Eli Whitney created the cotton gin in 1793. The cotton gin is a machine that separates the cotton seeds from the cotton. Although the cotton gin made growing cotton more affordable, it also made having slaves more necessary. In the opinion of plantation owners, if the cotton gin hadn't been created, then there could have possibly been no more slavery or civil war, and tons of lives could have been saved. After the invention of the cotton gin, cotton became the most important cash crop in the South. The demand for cotton went up, and slaves weren't needed for separating the seeds anymore, but they were put to work picking more cotton. In 1831, Nat Turner, who was a preacher, planned a slave rebellion. Turner assembled a bunch of his friends to go and kill every white person they could find, using axes and guns. They ended up killing at least 57 people before getting caught and then hanged. By 1860, slavery had been made illegal in the North, but in the South, over 1/3 of the population was slaves. Even though most Southerners didn't own slaves, there was still a large number in the South to support the cotton economy. The Underground Railroad was a way to help slaves escape either to the North or Canada. The people who helped the slaves escape and move from safe house to safe house were sometimes called conductors. The most famous conductor was Harriet Tubman, a former slave, who helped hundreds of slaves to escape. In the years leading up to the Civil War, the North and South disagreed on many things, including slavery. Many Southerners became more and more concerned that Northerners wanted to end slavery in the South. Abraham Lincoln, being elected in 1860, drove them to the edge and caused 7 Southern states to separate. The Civil War lasted from 1861 to 1865. This war killed 620,000 soldiers and injured millions of them. Even though President Lincoln and the northern states didn't get involved in the Civil War to end slavery, but instead to keep the country together, Lincoln came to believe that freeing the slaves in the South was the only way to bring the country back together. So on January 1st, 1863, Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. The Emancipation Proclamation said that any slaves in states that were not part of the Union were free. President Lincoln realized that the Emancipation Proclamation wasn't enough. Lincoln knew that to end slavery, the Constitution would have to be amended. That led to the 13th Amendment, which was ratified in 1865. The 13th Amendment made slavery illegal. In 1976, way after slavery had ended, Alex Haley published the book Roots. Roots was then turned into a miniseries in 1977. This miniseries is one of the most watched of all time. Roots was based on Alex Haley's family history, starting with his ancestors being taken from Africa and brought to America to be slaves. Slavery was one of the worst times in American history. Many lives were lost in this tragic era.